President Schultz was born and raised in the state of Virginia. He spent approximately 30 years in higher education. During his tenure, he studied and worked at 6 different universities, which provide him with a comprehensive perspective in which to evaluate, assess, and advance the many systems, policies, and procedures within any university environment. He's committed to creating the best possible undergraduate experience for you, the K-State student. As a student, he began his education at Old Dominion University, transferred to Virginia Tech, where he completed his BS and PhD in chemical engineering. He was an assistant professor at the University of North Dakota, associate professor at Michigan Tech, and held the positions of director, dean, and vice president at Mississippi State University. But as K-Staters, we have the privilege of calling Dr. Schultz our president. Please help me welcome K-State's 13th president, Dr. Kirk Schultz, gang, with a big happy Thursday.
1, 2, 3.
Happy Thursday!
Great, thank you. Are we ready? Testing. Can y'all hear me? Everybody hear me all right? Okay. How about in the back? Everybody has to put away their cell phones and stuff? No. Anyway, it's a real pleasure to be here today. I'm going to visit with you a little bit about some of my personal viewpoints, and I've called it the 16 Principles of Leadership, but this is not out of a book necessarily. It's out of a lot of different things and based on my experiences as a leader. And so I'm going to spend some time today talking to you a little bit about my background, where I come from. Then we'll get into that, and I'll probably go for about 25 to 30 minutes. Then we'll have time for some questions and things like that. So anyway. So one of the first things is, what do I do in my spare time? In my introduction, I talked about all the places I've been, but I do have two sons. I think some of you met my wife, Noel, who is a professor in electrical and computer engineering here at K-State. I have an older son, Tim, who's a freshman at Mississippi State University, and he's same age as you all are, majoring in computer science. And I was excited. I was out at lunch today. I was driving back, getting ready for this, and he calls. And my son never calls during the middle of the day. And it turns out he needed some money. So I know you all never call your parents and ask them for money, but it was still, so I kind of forced him, I guilted him into talking to me a little bit about how his classes were going, but then got to my office and sent him the money. So I guess it works. And that's our oldest son there wearing the K-State stuff. We're also very active in scouting. I was an Eagle Scout. Both my sons were Eagle Scouts, and that's my younger son, Andrew, who's a freshman at Manhattan High School. And he just got his Eagle Scout in June, right before we moved to Kansas. And that's something that my whole family has been involved and engaged in, sort of throughout my life. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later. We also like to travel. And we do a lot of family traveling, and that's just one of our things we like to do. We go to Disney World. We've been overseas a couple times. We've been to Kansas City. So we've got short trips, long trips. Right now, Noel is over in the Middle East, and she's been there for a week. So we get to travel all over the world as well, and that's kind of a cool and neat thing to do. And then finally, we love college sports, and you can't see it. It looked great on my computer screen. That's actually the UCLA game, and one of the kind of bonus things that comes with being president is they let you go to some of these away football games. So I'd always wanted to see the Rose Bowl, and so we had a chance to go out there, watch a game in the Rose Bowl, cheer on K-State, and visit Southern California all at the same time. So kind of a neat deal all the way around. Well, one of the interesting things is when I grew up, I grew up in Norfolk, Virginia Beach. That's on the East Coast, large city, a couple million people, 2.5, 3 million people. The only notable thing about the Norfolk, Virginia Beach area, largest population center in the country without a full-time professional sports franchise. There's not an NFL team, NHL team, any of those kind of things there, because it's got a very transient population because of the military. So I grew up in there. And I went to school. I moved from Norfolk on the coast to a land-grant school. Everybody talks about how isolated Manhattan is. Where I went to school in Blacksburg, Virginia, was about 5 hours away from the coast in the mountains. So a very picturesque place to go, but definitely sort of out in the middle of nowhere. I'm going to move this up a little bit. I met my wife there, and we decided at that point that we were willing to move to get a job when we finished up. We would move as far south as probably North Carolina. We'd maybe move to Maryland. And if we were really desperate, maybe sort of West Virginia. And that was it. Okay, we were going to be a really little tight circle. So it's no different than you all saying, well, yeah, I really would like to work in Kansas City. If I was really desperate, I might go, all the way over to Columbia, Missouri, or up to Nebraska, but I'm going to stick in Kansas. That's going to be it. So here we were, 27, had a child, we're married, and we wanted to stay in this region. So sent out resumes. All I got was rejection letters from all these places close by. And I had 3 universities that were interested in me coming to teach. The University of North Dakota in Grand Forks. Okay, never even been to the Midwest, but that was one of the places. South Dakota School of Mines, which is in Rapid City, South Dakota, where the faces are. And the third place was Villanova University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So obviously, we weren't going to be able to stay close to that. So we went out to the University of North Dakota in Grand Forks in May, and it was a beautiful day. 75 degrees, sunny, everybody was friendly. I thought, why don't more people live in this state? How come there's not more than 700,000 people who call North Dakota home? 3 years later, I learned why. But anyway, so we moved to Grand Forks, North Dakota, small university, 13,000 students. They're the Fighting Sioux. They're known for like 6-time Division I men's hockey championships. So that's what they're really known for. And it's very cold there. Very cold. So you wake up in the morning, it's December, you get up, sun shining in your window, it's just beautiful. You get up, you're having your cup of coffee, whatever you like to do in the morning, look outside, say, oh, what a nice day, be minus 30. Absolute temperature. And we were there, and for 6 weeks, it was below 0 every day. So a nice place, but very, very far north. And they told me that Kansas winters aren't that bad, so we're keeping our fingers crossed. Well, after that, it turns out my wife was getting her PhD, and we couldn't both, at that time, they didn't have an opportunity for her, so we had to pick up and move again. So we wound up moving to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Okay, Michigan's the 2 mittens. The top part of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan has a little thumb in there that sticks out in the middle of Lake Superior. Okay, if you ever go look at a Michigan map, you'll see it. Believe it or not, there's a university there. Michigan Tech, or it used to be called the Michigan School of Mines. And what was interesting about Michigan Tech is it gets lots of lake effect snow. I mean, a lot of lake effect snow. 250 inches annually of snowfall. So and they had a big, when we interviewed, it was during the summer again. I guess I should say don't interview during the summer, but they had this big yardstick that went up to 300 inches. It was just sitting up there and you could look at. And you remember thinking, oh, that's a stupid thing. Well, it gave you an idea of really how much that is. So you had snow banks in places where big parking lots they would have to take and use it as a snow dump because there's nowhere to put it. Because if you think about it, you snow blow. After a while, the banks get so high, the snow blower can't get up over the banks. So we lived there for 6 winters and decided then that we wanted to do something a little different. I was interested in an administrative career, and we wanted to move to a place that had a much larger, big-time sports complex. So we moved to the Southeastern Conference and Mississippi State University. Now, Mississippi State, if any of you have been there, is Kansas State's twin. Okay, it's a little smaller, but it's very similar. Students come from the same kind of backgrounds that you all do. It has the same sort of athletic budget that we have here. It has the same feel to the campus that it does. The buildings look different, but it's very, very similar. And there I went through a series of jobs, and then, as you all know, moved to Manhattan, Kansas. The point of the slide is, as you all are sitting there and thinking about leadership experiences and things that you would like to do in your life, if you would have showed this to me when I was 27 years old and graduating from college, I would have said, no way, that's us. We're never going to move around that much. We don't want to be in that area of the country. There's no reason we would ever want to leave. And the point of the thing is that you just have to be flexible as you go through your careers and your lives on where opportunities lie. And if we had never gone to the North Dakota and gotten a taste and flavor of the Midwest, I'm not sure that we would have been interested in moving here to Kansas State. So it's one of those interesting kinds of things that as you look through your pathways, you never know where they're going to go, and you have to be flexible. So I want to quickly summarize some of my leadership activities. And people are wired differently. I have a brother and a sister. Okay, you could put my brother in a room with 3 people and say, you got to lead them out of the room, and we come back an hour later and they'd still be in the room, okay? It was sort of like genetically, every ounce of leadership was just sucked dry and wasn't there. On the other hand, when I was young, I always wanted to be out in front. Doesn't mean I was always right, because I wasn't, but I always wanted to be out in front, and so we were just wired so completely differently. Now, so what happened is, I was student body president at high school, and I'm not going to read all this to you, but one of the interesting things, and we're going to get back to this at the end of my presentation, is I've been involved in a lot of different activities, not all successfully. And that's one of the things that's important, is there's some risk involved in all these things. Not everything has always worked exactly the way I thought it would. I've had some flame outs and stuff, and we'll talk about those as we go through it. But I think that the key thing is, it wasn't like one day I woke up and I said, I think I'll be university president. Sent in my resume to Kansas State. They said, Kirk, you're a great guy, come on. We'll pay you all this money, you can live in the house, and you can be our president. It was a series of different steps that took that weren't all necessarily related to I knew what I was going to do. It was different things that came up in my life. So everything from being active in college where you are, being active in high school, being active in graduate school, and then opportunities that came up as I was a faculty member at different institutions. So you all are in this class to learn these kind of things. So I want you to we're going to take 1 minute here. I want you to turn next to you, and if you got a piece of paper or something to scribble on, I'm going to ask you, what are some attributes of a leader? Okay, very quickly, you got 1 minute. Go ahead. Okay. Okay, somebody give me one. One thing you came up with. Yes, sir. I'm sorry? Optimistic. Okay, that's a good one. Another one. Yes, ma'am. Charismatic. Okay. Anything else? Yes, in the back. A good speaker. Good communicator? Just good speaker. Okay, good. Okay, that's a good one. Yes, sir. Open-minded. Okay. Right over here. Yes, ma'am. Constant. Tell me what you mean by that.
Like they have to have consistency. They can't be all over the board with their goals.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else? How about some? Yeah, there you go, right in the back. Confidence. Okay. Another one. Yes. Humble. Okay, we'll get back to that. Yes, ma'am.
You can motivate people on to, you don't always have to have the spotlight to motivate somebody else to use the spotlight.
Okay. So support of team members and a motivator. Yes, sir. Passionate. That's a great one. Yes, sir. Trustworthy. If somebody starts doing trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, that's the Boy Scout thing. I know that we're, yes, back over here. I'm sorry? Respectful. Any other ones? Okay, let's just say you wrote all those down. It's tough. And if we went through another 5 minutes and I kept going, that list gets longer and longer and longer. The question is there anybody alive and walking that actually has all of those characteristics as part of them? And the answer I'll give you is that people have, I believe, some pieces of those, but not all of them. And that's one of the things that hopefully that you're going to be able to do is develop some of those skills as we move through it. So, leadership and management. Let's also, I want you to take, I'm going to give, this is the last 1 minute exercise. I'm going to take 1 minute, and I want you to answer this question. What's the difference between a leader and a manager? And then we're going to get back to this later in the talk. So you got 1 minute, same person. Go ahead. Okay. All right. Okay. Now, by a show of hands, okay, let's just make sure everybody's awake. So, how many of you believe that the Wildcats are going to beat OU? Okay. Those of you who do not have your hands up are not true fans. Okay. Okay. How many of you think that generally leadership is good and management is more negative? How many would agree with that statement? Now, you got to put your hand up so I can see it. Okay, that's about half the people in the room. Okay, but about 10 years ago, there's all kinds of stuff that would come out that would sort of be anti-manager and pro-leader. And the good thing is I think there's an understanding now that you need a balance point there, but we're going to talk about that some. So let me run through my principles. Okay, back over here, we had be a good communicator. And I've got some people there that I put up here. Ronald Reagan, and all of you knew him from the history books, was listed by many people as one of the great communicating presidents that we had. He was very effective at making speeches and appearing before the media and things like that. Martin Luther King is another person. If you heard his voice, you immediately know who it is. And was a very effective communicator during his time for what he was trying to convey. Okay, Bill Gates. This is a different kind of communicator. I'm not saying that Bill Gates is the greatest person giving speeches in the world, but Bill Gates has probably, whether you like Microsoft or not, done more to reform the way we communicate electronically than any other person. Okay, the last person, Winston Churchill, another person that was a very effective communicator in their time. Now, some of these people may all have charisma. Somebody else mentioned charisma at one point. But I think this is a key thing of a leader. Now, here's a challenge you all have. Here's a challenge I have. President of a university, Kansas State, $650 million a year budget, 5,500 faculty and staff or employees, 23,500 students, and what, 50,000, just for round numbers, alumni. Okay, as president, I have to communicate with all of those folks in some way, form, or fashion. Now, the way you all like to communicate today, peer-to-peer, maybe you send each other a text message, okay? And you send a text message, you don't use proper grammar, you know, you just use the little things like that. That's how I communicate with my son. That's why I know that he's desperate if he actually spells the words out. But you all would communicate back and forth that way, which is fine. However, how many of you have tried to text with your grandparents? Okay, yeah, okay. Some of them get it. Some of them, you know, you can send them a text and you just never get anything back. There's a few technique-savvy grandparents, but the thing is this: if somebody's 80 years old, they are probably going to communicate in a different way. So in my office, what do I get? I get handwritten letters from alumni in longhand. I get email notes. I get typewritten letters on manual typewriters. I get all kinds of things. And the point is this: when you say an effective communicator, as a leader, you have to communicate effectively to the people in your organization or your group. And you have to communicate to them the way that's effective for them, not the way that's effective for you. So I'll put out both letters and email notes, and we'll do things on the web, and we'll do paper magazines, and all of those things. You say, well, Kirk, that's all old-fashioned stuff. Why do you do it? It's because I have to respond effectively to all those constituents out there. So as you go through your careers and your life and working in your organizations and leadership positions you have, remember, it's not how you are most comfortable communicating, it's how your audience needs to get the information that's critical. Principle 2, give the people who work for you the freedom and flexibility to use their talents without risk. Every speaker that you'll have will talk about this. You know, what's their philosophy? Well, I bring in really good people. I don't micromanage. I let them do their job. I mean, you've heard that so many times. I would say less than 10% of the people I ever worked for actually abided by this. Everybody says it, but they abide by it. Now, what are the challenges as a leader of abiding by this? What this means is I go up to Fred and I say, Fred, this is something we're interested in, and I'd like you to take charge of this. I'd like you to lead it. Okay? So Fred goes off, puts his team together, and comes back. And I look at it and I go, this isn't what I wanted. You know, Fred, you need to do this and move that and put this over here. What have I done? Okay, the next time I walk up to Fred and say, oh, I want you to lead this and get an assignment, Fred's going to go, well, you know what? All he's going to do is change it to whatever he wanted in the first place. Okay? And by the time I give Fred that fifth thing to do, Fred's going to do the minimum amount possible because he knows Kirk's just going to do what I want to do. The difference is I have to be comfortable giving that to Fred and saying, Fred, here's sort of what the important things to me. And I get it back, and I look at that, and I go, you know, this isn't exactly how I would do it, but that's okay. And that's hard as a leader because you've got something in your mind that you think you want to see, and that other person may not have that exactly. But if you can do that, and Fred brings it back, and he said, Fred, this is fantastic. I think is not exactly what I was thinking, but this will do the job. Thank you for your hard work and your team's hard work. The next time I ask Fred to do something, he's going to be more creative and really try hard to do a good job of that because I'm not getting in there and moving things around. So, like I said, you'll see everybody talk about this, but it's very difficult as a leader to let go of those things enough to let other people do them. Number 3, be able to listen when necessary and speak up when necessary, and you've got to balance those two important skills. Okay, when you're sitting in a meeting or when you're sitting down with somebody, you got to listen carefully. One of the things I've had to do as a new person coming into Kansas State is listen to a lot of people. However, it was interesting. I went to my first Board of Regents meeting, and I'm sitting there, and there's 6 presidents, essentially, of Regents institutions. There's the 2 major research universities, us and the University of Kansas, Wichita State, Fort Hays State, Pittsburgh State, and Emporia State. Okay? So the Regents asked a question, and I had told my wife, I said, first Regents meeting, I don't want to come across as a jerk, so I'm just going to sit there and listen. I found out very quickly that while they wanted me to listen, they were interested in K-State taking a strong stand on things because they were expecting, even though I was the new president, to have a strong stance on something. So sitting there and just listening wasn't going to work. I needed to stand up and say something. On the other hand, me coming into a room of people and saying, let me tell you what we're going to do at this university. You go, Kirk, you haven't been here but 2 days. How can you tell us what to do? You don't know much about it. So you got to balance those two things out. So listening is important and develop good listening skills, but speak when necessary, and you got to learn to balance those two things out. How much do you hate being in a committee meeting or a group meeting or anything where one person can't shut up? Okay? And then one person's not saying anything. And you know that that person's probably got some good ideas and this person's talking too much. How do you balance that out? Okay? And I know you all will learn some of these skills. I think I know these skills by screwing up and learning and going to classes and all those sort of things, but it's still a challenge. I'll sit around with the vice presidents of the university, the leaders, the people you all know, and I'll have to balance out in a meeting. We've been there an hour talking about something, and 3 people have said nothing, and 4 people have said stuff the whole time. How do I pull those other 3 people in? So, number 4, don't remind everyone of everything you've ever done whenever they bring up an idea. Your colleagues will respect you without reading your resume. I had a great person that was one of my associate deans at Mississippi State. Terrific resume. But when he got up in front of a group, he would go, well, let me tell you. You know, I worked at NASA, and I did what you're doing. And for the first 10 minutes, all he did was talk about his resume. You know, how many publications he had. And after a while, you went, Roger, okay, I've sat in here, I've listened to this 20 times. You don't need to tell me this stuff anymore. And so I had an awkward thing of sitting down with one of the people who worked in my office and saying, one of the things that you need to do a better job of is not reminding everybody of this sort of stuff. Now, you see this on Donald Trump and all that kind of stuff. As any of you have had to do this know, it's much more difficult than it ever shows on TV. This is somebody you might go to dinner at their house. You guys go and do stuff together. You got to sit down and have a very difficult conversation with somebody you respect a great deal. These are the kinds of things you have to watch for. Does it mean that you don't have to put out and let people know who you are from a credibility point of view? Absolutely not. But I think you just have to balance that carefully. Okay, principle number 5, and this is a significant one. Most university presidents are at least 55. Most are over 60, and I'm 46. Okay, so I can guarantee you when I walk in a room with university presidents, I'm always the youngest guy in the room, and generally, they have children my age. Okay, now that's an interesting meeting dynamic. Okay, you're sitting there as a peer, and the person's talking about their son who's older than you are. Okay, and that's a bizarre thing. But this is one of the mistakes that we make in higher ed a lot in hiring. Never mistake age, gray hair, pedigree, gender, or IQ for leadership ability. Okay, just because Fred Smith over here, I use Fred Smith a lot because I'm not very creative with names. If there's anybody named Fred here, I apologize in advance. But there you go, Fred. Sorry. Okay, is he a good one? Okay, that's fine. He won't be offended then. Okay. So what happens is we go, this individual is a terrific teacher. They're great in the classroom. They're great in front of students. They publish well. They do great research. They're going to make a great administrator. Okay, and what happens, they fall flat on their face because they don't have the skills to manage people, to lead a unit, to communicate effectively, to do all these wonderful things that are there. So my only point here is just because somebody is older, okay, doesn't mean that somehow they're going to be a better leader. Just because they're smarter than you are doesn't mean they're going to be a better leader. My brother, the one that couldn't lead anybody out of a cave with breadcrumbs, is much smarter than I am. He made much better grades than I did. And if we had to solve a math problem, and he's my guy there. I mean, he'd do it much better, quicker, faster than me all the time. If you want a chip design for your computer, he's the guy to go to. But just because somebody's smarter doesn't make them a better leader. And you need to remember this when you're in a position of evaluating a person for a leadership position. And maybe you're in a student organization and you've got somebody comes in, you go, well, this person's got a 4.0, man, they're going to be great. And you've got somebody else with a different grade point average that has a different set of skills. Remember, the skills are what's important, not some of these other things. The other thing to remember, and this is very important for all of you, is things like gender and race should make no difference in these sorts of things. Now, you would like to think that today it wouldn't make a difference if you have a male and a female standing in a room about who people assume is the authority figure, but that's not the case. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we go on, but one of the things you all need to be sensitive to is to remember not to make assumptions about these sorts of things a priori. Okay, this goes back to our original thing. Balance leadership with management and don't shirk either one. I had a dean I worked with at Mississippi State. He was a tremendous visionary. He knew where he wanted to take the engineering school. He was a great fundraiser. Out there he raised tons of money for the university, did great different things. Okay, in my 3 years I worked for him, I got 0 performance reviews. He loved being the guy out in front. The problem was he left a train wreck everywhere behind him because he wouldn't do the daily sorts of things that one needed to do. So these are sometimes not always the most pleasant things, but are you getting your stuff done on time? Are you doing things like performance reviews? And here's my philosophy on a performance reviews, and that's where you sit down with somebody annually and you're going to talk to them about their job performance. Okay? How can you be a leader and move a unit ahead if you're not even giving the people who work for you constructive feedback on what they can do better? And so I've known people say, well, I just really don't like doing that. It's kind of an awkward thing, and I've known that person for a long time, and it's just hard to sit down and really talk about what they're doing. And this is the hard parts of being a leader, is you got to take somebody that you may go out with their family every day of the week. You go have a drink at your favorite place or whatever. Of course, since you all aren't 21, it would be a Diet Coke or coffee at their place. You would sit down with them, and you say, how can I have that conversation? And this is one of the things about leadership is it's hard, but this is important. Balance those two. Number 7, dress well and maintain an appropriate external experience. First impressions do matter. This is really an important one, and it's a critical one. And by this, I don't mean that you have to go out and spend lots of money on your clothes. But one of the things, if you're going to go in for a job interview, or you're going to go meet president of the university, or you're going to go do anything like that, you say, well, I'm just kind of a laid-back person, and I'm not a real big believer that appearance ought to matter. I'll just be able to go in there and be yourself. Okay, that sounds wonderful, and I love it philosophically. But the problem is people today still look and judge on appearance at first. So one of the things that you need to remember is it doesn't mean that you got to wear a suit to class. It just means remember the audience that you're going to. Very rarely will you go and somebody say, wow, you're really overdressed for this. They joke around a little bit. Be the person that walks in jeans and a T-shirt and everybody else has got coat and tie on and nice dresses. All of a sudden then you feel really awkward. So remember this. This was reinforced to my wife and I. We were buying probably our second or third car. I was an assistant professor, not making a lot of money, but we had okay jobs. And we decided to go in and buy a car. So we walk in this Honda dealership, and and I have a suit on because I was coming from work, and Noel had her nice clothes on. Oh, they fell all over themselves trying to help us get everything for the car. We had just done, about a week earlier, gone into a different dealership, and we'd been out sort of exercising, that kind of a thing, so had shorts and a T-shirt and stuff. Man, they didn't want to pay us a time of day. Now, walking into a car dealership, how big a deal is that? Should you get dressed up just to go do that? No, but it does make some difference, and just remember that as you move through your career. When you got that interview, when you got that opportunity for that scholarship, any of those things, when you're going to meet the donors that gave money for the new Leadership Studies building, how impressive would that be when they show up and say, wow, it's really nice if people sort of dressed up a little bit. Those little things in life make a big difference. Recognize your shortcomings and surround yourself with people that can help with these things. I'm not the most patient person in the world, and I'm not real detail-oriented. You know, I'd sort of say, well, that stuff will take care of itself. So today, okay, how many of you walked by Memorial Stadium? Okay, the old stadium, the one with crumbling. How many of you walked by there? Lots of, okay. You know, how wonderful does that look from the outside? Not too good, right? One of the projects that we're going to get started is we're eventually going to have that side of the stadium as a welcome center, so that when prospective students and everything come in, that will be there. Well, today we had a meeting. It was there with the chief financial officer and several other people, and we're talking about getting this project going, and I'm enthusiastic. I want to go raise money and do all this stuff. Somebody else in the room is like, oh, remember, we got to move this person here. We got to find somewhere to go. I'm like, whatever. You know, let's talk about the building. Okay, the problem is it needs both of us, because I'll be worried about going and raising money for the building. There's somebody who's got to say, well, that person's sitting there. They're in the building now. We got to figure out somewhere for them to go. So I recognize that I need people like that around me so that we can work together and make sure that we make things happen. Recognizing yourself, what your strengths and weaknesses are, and when you're building that leadership team, whether it's going to do an event, whether it's going to lead a student organization, whether it's going to be something at work, make sure you look for people that have got some skills you don't have. The worst thing that could happen here is for me to have a presidential cabinet of a bunch of clones of Kirk. Okay? That would not work well. We'd all want to be in charge. Nobody would worry about the details. Everybody would be so impatient. We wouldn't always take the long view. But on the other hand, I put some different personalities around me, and we have the ability to argue back and forth. It works very, very well. Okay. Do what you feel is right at all time, regardless of circumstance. I'm a big believer that principle-based leadership says, in essence, that I have a set of principles I used to go by that I'm going to use when I'm making leadership decisions. That they're not sort of situational ethics. You know, well, if this happens, then I'll do this. If this happens, then I'll do that. You know, you'll develop these for yourself, but you need to make sure that you make that decision that you feel is right at the appropriate time. Don't sit in your office waiting for people to come see you. Go see them in your workplace. This is a small thing, but this is big as you go through your careers in life. It makes a big difference, I found. You know, I have a nice, comfortable office, good chairs, free coffee when people come in. You know, it's a nice deal. Why would I ever want to leave that during the day? Because it's a hassle. It takes me a long time to walk across campus and all that. People are so appreciative when you walk over and show up in their office for a meeting and you schedule it that way instead of making them always come to your place. Remember this. This will be a big thing for you no matter what industry you work in, no matter where you go, whether it's working in lots of different areas. Go to people's workplaces. It makes a big difference to them. Number 11, there are always people who come up with reasons why you can't do something and ignore them. Okay, you've seen those little tear-off calendars. My wife loves those things. We got them all over the house, you know, all the little sayings, you know, smile because it'll make somebody happy. It's just all that kind of stuff. Anyway, this was on one of those from years ago, not the Far Side cartoon about trying to hang the guy with a horse, but this over here was on there, and I've taped it up. Ever since I was at University of North Dakota, in every office that I've had this written down somewhere close to my desk. And this is really important because we wouldn't do half the things that we do in the world today if somebody didn't decide they were going to change something. Nobody who's 46 should ever be president of a land-grant university. It's too young, you can't get there. Nobody who comes from Kansas State will ever be a billionaire. Nobody from Kansas State will ever make a difference in world hunger, whatever you pick. Okay, you can hear those kind of things. Well, if you went to Harvard and you had these connections, you could do all this wonderful stuff. Forget about all that. If you really set your mind to it, it makes a big difference. Principle 12, I always put critical decisions and promises in writing. I've inherited jobs from several people over my career that didn't put anything in writing. I had one person mentor me once that said, well, if you don't put it in writing, nobody can ever pin you down on it. Okay? They were trying to be helpful. And that way, you know, if everything kind of hit the fan, you could claim you didn't know anything. I've had 2 people that told me this. Yeah, I think it's terrible. And the reason is this, my memory's not so good, okay, is one. And second, say we have a conversation, and we talk and we agree on something. You heard one thing, I heard something else. When I put it in writing, we look at it and you go, wait, this isn't what I thought we talked about. Or you go, yeah, this is what we talked about. So I think that this is a big important thing. Put in writing what your decisions are. And in my mind, if I'm going to make a presidential commitment to help something, if I'm not going to put it in writing and a piece of paper, then it's not a real commitment. I'm going to move through these quickly, so I want to have some Q&A time. 13, okay, when giving controversial news, always do it in a way you would feel comfortable, even if the roles were reversed. Okay, one of the favorite things we do in higher ed, we're interviewing provost candidates now. We've got 4 of them on campus, 2 this week, 2 next week. Okay, 3 of those people are not going to get the job. Okay, that's just the way we're going to only hire 1 provost. One of the favorite old-time things to do was you wanted to call people and let them know they didn't get the job. Okay, I had a friend of mine who did not get a dean's job somewhere. So guess what? He's driving back from a competition with a bunch of students in the car, and he gets a call from somebody who says, well, we're sorry, but you didn't get the job. Now, what a horrible time to have taken that call. He didn't know what they were calling about, because today on cell phones, typically what we have is a cell phone. So we got somebody there 24/7. It wasn't calling an office and saying, call me back. So one of the things that I do, okay, this is just a quick aside, is like with a provost candidate we eventually decide to hire, I'll email them a general offer and say, let's pick a time to talk. And I'll also email the people that didn't get the job and say, did a great job. We really appreciate you coming to Kansas State. We've elected not to extend you an offer at this time, and I'd be happy to talk with you about it on the phone at your convenience if you would like. Because, you know, the nice thing is they can read that BlackBerry note or their smartphone note or see it in their office. They can say, oh, man, I'm so disappointed. They can go have go call their spouse. They can take off from work. They can say, well, I didn't want to go anyway, whatever it is. But it gives them a little bit of time to think through it. So how would you feel most comfortable if somebody's going to give you bad news? 14, always treat your boss in the same way you want your employees to treat you. Okay, this is a critical one. You know, it's fun to bitch about the boss. Okay, you like to say, oh, that moron. You know, if I was only there, I knew how I'd run this university, or I'd run this organization, or I'd do this. And then you say, how come my boss never tells me what's going on? He won't trust me. And then the people below you are thinking the same thing. So make sure that when you look up and down the chain, that you're keeping this in mind. Okay, 15. Pick a time-life management system and use it regularly. I'm a Franklin Covey person. It doesn't make any difference what you use, but pick something that you use to map out goal setting, time management, what is it that I want to do in the day, the week, the month, the year. There's lots of different ones out there, so pick one and stick with it. Don't do it by like Post-it notes. You know, I'm going to write this on a note and slap it up on the mirror and all this, and then people go, well, Kirk's a nice guy, but he's really kind of disorganized. I mean, we see that in the movies, and it's funny, but if you're working with somebody who's disorganized, it's very frustrating. So pick whatever you want and stick with it. 16. This is a big one. It's not how long and hard you work, but how effectively you work. Okay, and think about this. So I had a friend of mine in graduate school. Man, he came in earlier than I did. He left later than I did. He worked a lot more hours than I did. But you know what he spent most of his time doing? Having coffee and talking to people. I mean, he was a great guy, but he'd go around, talk to this person, that person. About 10 o'clock, he'd start get going, and then take a nice long lunch and do all this kind of stuff. And then he's just exhausting himself because he's there all the time. So remember this. You want to be friendly in your work or your environment, but keep this in mind. You can sometimes get done in 15 minutes what could take 2 hours if you're being effective with your time, and that's critical. Okay, so what do you do? What is my advice? And I got one more slide after that. You need to seek leadership opportunities. Leadership, you can do everything you can to enhance your skills, but you got to get in there and do it. Learn from leaders around you, both good and bad. I always say don't make the same mistakes twice. There's lots of things I've done wrong, but try not to do and make the same mistake a second time. And finally, I had a mentor back when I was in college who said this: a ship sitting in the water is not moving or going anywhere. You need to move in some direction. Well, I don't know. Should I move here? Should I take this opportunity? Should I do this? You got to, at some point, just jump in the water and start swimming a little bit and see where it goes. And then I've got some books that I think are particularly good on leadership. And with that, I am done, and I would be happy to take any questions you might have. So.
I have an interview this week, and I was just wondering what kind of advice you would give me for a position that I'm really interested in, and what I could say at my interview that would kind of give me that step ahead.
Well, it's interesting. They had a search consultant that was that I talked to a lot and led the Kansas State search, not the search committee chair, but it's a person who's a headhunter type. So I would ask him all the time, what kind of advice do you have for me and all that. And it got down to the end, and I was going to before the Board of Regents and on campus here, and he said, be yourself. He said, you can do all the preparation you want in the world, but he said, inevitably, you got to be yourself. And I really think that sounds so parentish and cliche-ish, but there's a lot of truth to that, because you don't want to go work for an organization where you, or whatever it is, and you sort of put up, here's what I am, and then you get there, and that's what they're expecting, and that's not really what you're like. So I think it's very important to be really upfront about the types of things that you're looking for and they're looking for. And folks, if you've ever sat around in any group and interviewed somebody, you can tell sincerity like that. And if you can tell if a person's trying to tell you what you want to hear versus that's the way they are. So I would say that. The other thing is do some preparation work and always have what you think the first question they're going to ask you, have a prepared response. I don't mean memorize it, but something like, well, why are you interested in this position? And if I'm asking somebody that and they fumble around, I think, oh my God, they could have spent a little bit of time just making sure they had that first sentence so they knew what to say to get rolling. So I wrote down before I came onto campus 15 questions that I was pretty sure I would be asked something about, and then I outlined 3 or 4 points that I wanted to get in my mind to make sure I put in those. Now, I didn't carry those with me because I knew if I did that, it'd be a cheat sheet, and I'm trying to look at it, and people aren't saying, Kirk, you're not looking at me, you're looking at your sheets. But I think a little bit of interview like that, you should always know something about the group or the person you're talking to, if at all possible. So there's nothing more depressing than if I sit down and I'm talking to somebody and ahead of time they knew I was going to be there outside the state and they asked me if I'm from Lawrence. Okay, I go, 2 minutes on the web, buddy. You would have known we're in Manhattan, Kansas, not Lawrence. It just doesn't come across. And I'm not saying you would do that, but you know what I'm saying. Good luck. Hope it goes well. Anything else?
Okay, my question is when did you know that this is the career you wanted to do, and did you change your major at least 5 times like they say you will?
Yeah. I changed my major 1 time. I was going to go to medical school and be a doctor, and I would love to tell you I was going to go to medical school and be a doctor because I wanted to help people and all that. The real reason, doctors drove really nice cars. And I thought, hey, this is a way that I can have a nice job and drive a Mercedes. So that was probably not the best motivation on why medicine was a good career. And after a couple years in college, I had a friend who was a chemical engineer, and I toured a plant. I said, this is what I want to do. So I swapped. I did know, too, that my dad teaches at a university. My wife's dad taught at Virginia Tech, so I've been around higher education. I grew up on college campuses, so I knew, to be honest, I want something associated with higher ed. And then when I was in graduate school, I knew I'd like to be a president if I could at some point. But there's a lot of people interested in these jobs and not very many of them, so you never know if that's going to happen or what's going to go. So, but I didn't have like 5 years at this place and 2 years in this job. It was a little bit more meandering than that. But it's pretty rare to be able to say at 28 you'd like to do something. By the time you're 46, actually be doing it. So I consider myself very, very fortunate. In the right place at the right time, a lot. I think I want this to be a tremendously supportive environment for students, faculty, and staff. I really wanted somewhere where people look forward to coming to work. They look forward to coming in as a student. Doesn't mean you don't have the day-to-day grind stuff. That's all part of all of what we do. But I want people to be enthusiastic about the university, the direction it's going, and what it is that we're doing, so that I don't want them going back and somebody graduated here from 1960 and they go, oh, it was really great back in 1960, but it's just not the same today. I want that passion for the university to still be the same. The second thing that I want is I want this to be a place that people can come, whether you're a student or a faculty member, and it allows you to achieve what it is that you would like to. I want us to be looked upon as helping people to be successful in that regard. So if we could do those two things, I mean, campus will look nice, and we'll have some buildings and all that, but in general, I just want a place that people can come. I've been in lots of places that have beautiful buildings, beautiful facilities, and people don't like working there. And to me, sometimes we get too enamored if you just had this, that it somehow would be better, when if you like coming to work, and you like what you're doing, and people feel fulfilled about being here, that's what I'd like to see. We ask our faculty already to do a tremendous amount. And so here's the key. Is if I walk up to anybody and say, I'd like you to do X, they'll say, what am I not supposed to do X? And that's the key part that the universities forget. What we do is we sort of are always additive. You know, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do that, you need to do that. And so one of the critical things is I'm a strong believer that people need to work and do scholarship and teach in an area of their passion. What it is that they really get up in the morning and saying, this is really something I want to do. The worst thing that you can have is somebody who's not passionate in some area that feels they're being told to do whatever it is, whatever X might be. So we'll have some segment of campus that says we need to see this leadership component in all of our faculty. I have another group that says, well, we ought to see sustainability in all of our faculty. And I have another group that says we need to have worldview and internationalization in all of our faculty. The problem is you can't jam them all in there. So the best thing I think we can do is when we have this program like this that is as successful as it is, we just need to make sure we promote it on campus, and that faculty that might teach in something completely different and want to be engaged and involved have that opportunity to do so and put those things in their classes. That will work so much better at achieving what we would like than anybody from the president, provost, deans, whatever, saying you got to put this in there. It just doesn't work. Faculty are sort of like independent contractors, okay? There's 1,400 of them, and it's an industry, say, I could say, you gotta do this, and you say, I'm not gonna do it, and I say, clean out your desk. You know, I'm not saying that's a good way to do it, but that's possible. I can tell a faculty member, I want you to do this, they'll go, no. And I go, but I would like you to. And they say, well, I'm a tenured faculty member, and I've got this work I'm doing over here, and I don't think I really want to do that. And there's not a lot I can do about it. So you have to lead differently. You have to make the opportunity out there so the person says, I want a piece of that, and that's the way to get it done. So I'm looking at probably we'll have 5 to 6 cross-cutting campus things. Leadership's one of them. And we're going to hope that and encourage our faculty to be engaged in those different cross-cutting initiatives in their classes. So that's my answer for what it's worth. So, yeah. Anything else? I know y'all got other things to do. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll just be up here for a while, turn off the microphone so it's not projected all over the place. Got any other questions, come on up, and thank you for being an attentive audience today. And